The Whispering Alley. In the heart of a bustling city, there lay an alley unlike any other, shrouded in mystery and whispers. This was Whispering Alley, a narrow, fog-filled path that wound between ancient buildings like a forgotten secret. It was here that Mia, an intrepid young journalist, found herself one chilly evening, her curiosity piqued by tales of eerie whispers that echoed through the alley after dark. Mia wasn't alone in her quest for the truth. Accompanying her was Ethan, a local historian whose knowledge of the city's hidden tales was unmatched. Together, they stepped into the misty embrace of the alley, the city's clamor fading behind them like a distant memory. As they ventured deeper, the fog seemed to thicken, swallowing the dim glow of the streetlights. The whispers started softly, a mere rustling like leaves in a gentle breeze, but soon they grew clearer, forming hushed, unintelligible words that danced around them. Mia felt a shiver run down her spine, not just from the sudden drop in temperature, but from a growing sense of dread. The whispers, Ethan murmured. They say they're the voices of the past, trapped in these walls. His voice was a mix of fascination and unease, echoing Mia's own feelings. They pressed on, the whispers growing more insistent, as if urging them forward. Their journey led them to an old, bricked-up doorway, half hidden in the shadows. Here, the whispers seemed to converge, swirling around them in an almost palpable frenzy. Ethan traced his fingers over the weathered bricks, his expression turning solemn. Legend has it, he began in a low tone, that many years ago, something terrible happened here. A tragedy that left its imprint on the alley. Mia's heart raced as she listened, her reporter's instincts kicking in. She took out her recorder, the red light blinking in the dimness, capturing the haunting echoes of the alley. What kind of tragedy? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated, then said, there was a fire. A big one. It swept through this part of the city, claiming many lives. But it was here, in this alley, where the most lives were lost. They say the victims' final cries merged with the flames, becoming part of the alley itself. The story sent a chill through Mia. She could almost hear the crackling of flames amidst the whispers, the desperate cries of those long gone. It was a chilling thought, but as a journalist, she knew she had to delve deeper. They continued their exploration, the whispers now tinged with a sorrowful tone. As they rounded a bend, Mia stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. There, in the distance, was a shadowy figure, standing perfectly still. It was barely visible through the fog, but its presence was unmistakable. Ethan saw it too. He reached out, as if to hold her back, but Mia was already moving forward, drawn by a mix of fear and determination. As they approached, the figure seemed to waver like a mirage, and then vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Heart pounding, Mia reached the spot where the figure had stood. But there was nothing there, just the cold, damp bricks of the alley wall. It's said that those who perished here sometimes appear, Ethan said softly behind her. Ghosts of the past, reminders of the tragedy that occurred. The air around them felt heavy, laden with the weight of unspoken stories and forgotten lives. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone, that the eyes of the past were watching them, whispering their tales into the night. Their investigation continued, each step revealing more about the alley's sorrowful history. But as the night wore on, Mia began to feel a growing unease. The line between the present and the past seemed to blur, the whispers growing more fervent, as if resisting their intrusion. It was then that Mia made a decision. She turned to Ethan, her resolve clear. We need to tell this story, she said firmly. The world needs to know about Whispering Alley, about the voices that still linger here. Ethan nodded, a look of admiration in his eyes. Together, they retraced their steps, leaving the alley and its whispers behind. But even as they emerged into the city's lights, the echoes of the past followed them, a haunting reminder of the thin line between myth and reality. As Mia later sat at her desk, weaving the night's events into her article, she couldn't help but glance out the window at the city's skyline. Somewhere out there, in the heart of the city, Whispering Alley lay hidden, its secrets now part of her own story. A story of tragedy, of voices lost in time, and of a journalist and a historian who dared to listen. The Phantom of 7th Street. 7th Street was a place most people in the city avoided after dark. The once busy thoroughfare was now a deserted stretch of road, known more for its chilling tales than its faded shop fronts. It was here, under the flickering streetlights, that the story of the Phantom of 7th Street began to unfold. Detective Alex, a man of logic and reason, had always scoffed at the urban legends surrounding the street. Ghosts and phantoms were nothing more than stories to him. until he was assigned to investigate the mysterious sightings that had recently intensified. His partner in this unusual case was Sarah, a young investigator with a firm belief in the supernatural. She had requested to join the investigation, driven by a personal quest to prove that there was more to the world than what meets the eye. Their investigation began on a cold, moonless night. As they walked down the desolate street, the only sounds were their footsteps and the distant hum of the city. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the buildings. Alex, ever the skeptic, kept his eyes peeled for any logical explanation, a trick of the light, a reflection, or perhaps a prankster looking to capitalize on the street's infamy. Sarah, on the other hand, held her breath, half expecting to encounter the phantom at any moment. As they neared the end of the street, Sarah's hand flew to her mouth in shock. There, under a flickering streetlight, was a spectral figure, its form barely discernible. Alex saw it too, and for a moment, his skepticism wavered. The figure seemed to be beckoning them, and against Alex's better judgment, they followed. It led them to an old, abandoned building, its windows broken and its walls covered in graffiti. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Sarah's eyes were drawn to an old photograph on the ground. It was tattered and faded, but it depicted the street in happier times, bustling with life. In the background, there was a figure identical to the phantom they had just seen. "The Phantom of 7th Street," Sarah whispered, a mix of awe and fear in her voice. "It's real." Alex examined the photograph, his mind racing to find a logical explanation. It could be a coincidence, he argued, but even as he spoke, he knew his words lacked conviction. Their exploration of the building revealed more than just a photograph. Hidden beneath layers of dust and debris, they found old newspaper clippings detailing a tragic event that had occurred on 7th Street many years ago. A fire had ravaged the street, claiming several lives. Among the victims was a figure who bore a striking resemblance to the phantom. The revelation sent chills down their spines. Sarah's belief seemed to be validated, while Alex struggled to reconcile the evidence with his skepticism. The atmosphere grew tense as the weight of history pressed down on them. As they continued their investigation, strange occurrences began to happen. Objects moved on their own, cold drafts appeared out of nowhere, and the faint sound of sobbing echoed through the empty streets. One night, as they were about to leave, a sudden chill filled the air and the streetlights flickered violently. The phantom appeared again. This time its presence more pronounced, its form clearer. It seemed to be in pain, its ghostly hands reaching out to them. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" she asked. The phantom pointed to the building they had explored, and then vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Driven by a sense of urgency, Alex and Sarah returned to the building. They scoured every inch, looking for anything they might have missed. It was then that they discovered a hidden room, sealed off for decades. Inside, they found personal belongings of the victims of the fire, including diaries and letters. It was as if the room was a capsule of the past, holding the memories and the pain of those who had perished. Reading through the diaries, they learned of the hardships and dreams of those who had lived on 7th Street. The phantom, it seemed, was a manifestation of their unfulfilled lives and their longing to be remembered. Sarah looked at Alex, tears in her eyes. "They just want to be acknowledged, for their stories to be told," she said softly. Alex nodded, his skepticism replaced by a newfound understanding. They took it upon themselves to share the stories of the victims, to bring awareness to the tragedy that had befallen 7th Street. In the weeks that followed, the phantom sightings ceased. The street remained deserted, but the oppressive air of sorrow had lifted. The phantom of 7th Street had found peace, thanks to 2 investigators who were willing to listen to the whispers of the past. As they walked down 7th Street for the last time, Alex turned to Sarah. "I may never fully understand the supernatural," he said, "but I've learned that there are mysteries in this world beyond our comprehension." Sarah smiled, her belief in the unseen stronger than ever. Together, they had bridged the gap between skepticism and belief, uncovering a truth that was as tragic as it was enlightening. The Phantom of 7th Street was more than just an urban legend. It was a reminder of the lives that once filled the street, and the enduring power of memory and history. And for Alex and Sarah, it was a journey that would stay with them forever, a haunting tale of a street that whispered secrets from the beyond. The Cursed Subway. In the heart of the bustling city lay a mystery that few dared to explore, an old subway line, long abandoned and rumored to be cursed. It was this very mystery that drew Leo, an adventurous urban explorer, and Jenna, a cautious college student, to the forgotten depths of the city's underground. The subway had been closed for decades, its stations like ghost towns, and its tracks overgrown with the passage of time. Leo, with his insatiable curiosity, had heard the tales of the cursed subway, stories of ghostly passengers and trains that ran on their own. Jenna, though apprehensive, couldn't resist the lure of the unknown and joined Leo on his daring expedition. As they descended the graffiti-covered stairs into the subway, a sense of claustrophobia set in. The air was stale, and the only light came from their flashlights, casting long shadows on the walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant drip of water and their own footsteps. Their first discovery was an abandoned station, its platform covered in a thick layer of dust. The old advertisements on the walls were faded and peeling, frozen in time. As they explored, Jenna felt a growing unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The deeper they ventured, the stranger things became. Lights flickered in the distance, even though the power had been cut off years ago. The sound of a train echoed through the tunnels, sending shivers down their spines. But when they looked, there was nothing but darkness. It was when they found the derailed train that the true nature of the curse revealed itself. The train car was old, its paint chipped and its windows broken. Inside, the seats were covered in a thick layer of dust, but there was something unsettling about the scene. It was as if the passengers had just vanished into thin air. Leo, ever the thrill-seeker, wanted to press on, but Jenna couldn't ignore the sense of dread that had settled in her heart. She pleaded with Leo to leave, but he was determined to uncover the secrets of the cursed subway. Their journey took a terrifying turn when they encountered the ghostly passengers. Transparent figures appeared on the platform, their faces expressionless and their eyes hollow. They moved silently, passing through the walls and disappearing into the darkness. Leo and Jenna were frozen in fear, their rational minds struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. It was then that the true horror of the subway revealed itself. The ghostly figures began to converge on them, their whispers echoing in the tunnels. In a panic, they ran, the sound of their footsteps and ragged breaths filling the air. The subway seemed to come alive around them, the walls closing in, and the echoes growing louder. Every turn they took led them deeper into the maze of tunnels, the ghostly figures always just a step behind. Just when they thought they were hopelessly lost, Jenna spotted a light in the distance. With the last of their strength, they raced towards it, emerging into the night air, gasping for breath. They collapsed on the pavement, the city's noises a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the subway. As they looked back at the entrance, it seemed innocuous, just another part of the cityscape. But they knew the truth of what lay beneath. The experience changed them both. Leo, once a fearless explorer, was now more cautious, his curiosity tempered by the knowledge of the unknown dangers that lurked in forgotten places. Jenna, though still wary of the unexplained, had found a new strength in facing her fears. The cursed subway remained a mystery, its secrets hidden in the shadows. But for Leo and Jenna, it was a chilling reminder of the consequences of curiosity and the reality of the supernatural world that existed just beneath the surface of the everyday. The shadow on the bridge. The city had many landmarks, but none as infamous as the old bridge stretching across the river. It was an architectural relic, its steel beams rusting and its paint peeling, creating a picture of neglect. But it wasn't just the bridge's appearance that made the locals wary. It was the unexplained shadows and accidents that occurred on or near it. Rachel, an ambitious reporter with a keen interest in the city's mysteries, was drawn to the bridge's eerie reputation. She teamed up with Tom, a seasoned bridge engineer, to delve into the history and uncover the truth behind the sinister tales. Their investigation began with daytime visits to the bridge. Tom examined the structure, looking for any logical explanations for the accidents, while Rachel scoured through old newspaper archives. She discovered a pattern of unexplained incidents dating back decades, each marked by sightings of a dark, malevolent shadow. Armed with this knowledge, they decided to conduct a nighttime surveillance. As darkness fell, the bridge transformed. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the river below flowed silently like a black mirror. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding. Rachel set up her camera, her hands trembling slightly with a mix of excitement and fear. Tom, more pragmatic, kept a watchful eye on the structural integrity of the bridge. But as the night progressed, even he couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. It was just past midnight when they first saw it, a flicker of a dark figure moving along the bridge. It was there one moment and gone the next, like a whisper of smoke. Rachel's camera captured it, a blur of darkness against the night. They followed the shadow, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. As they moved, they heard the sound of metal creaking and the faint echo of footsteps that were not their own. Rachel's heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of fear and curiosity. Tom, usually stoic, clutched his flashlight tighter, his skepticism faltering. It was then that they found the journal, hidden beneath the loose planks of the walkway. It was old and weathered, its pages filled with the ramblings of a bridge worker from many years ago. He wrote of the shadow, describing it as a malevolent presence that haunted the bridge, causing malfunctions and accidents. He believed it was the spirit of a worker who had died during the bridge's construction. His death never properly mourned or resolved. The discovery sent chills down their spines. They now had evidence that the shadow was more than just an urban legend. It was a restless spirit, bound to the bridge by tragedy and unfulfilled justice. Determined to uncover more, Rachel and Tom continued their investigation, venturing further onto the bridge. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. In the pitch black, they felt it, a presence looming over them, its energy malevolent and angry. The bridge groaned under its weight, and the river below churned violently. Rachel and Tom were frozen in terror, realizing that they were not alone. The shadow emerged from the darkness, its form more defined now, a figure of a man, his features twisted in anger and pain. He moved towards them, and the bridge shuddered, as if responding to his rage. Rachel, her instincts as a reporter kicking in, began to speak, her voice trembling. "We know about you, about what happened. We want to tell your story, to give you peace." The shadow paused, its form flickering. For a moment, there was a sense of sadness, a glimpse into the soul of the restless spirit. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving behind a deafening silence. Rachel and Tom, their hearts pounding, made their way off the bridge. The lights flickered back on, casting the bridge in an eerie glow. They looked at each other, their faces pale, knowing they had come face to face with something beyond their understanding. In the days that followed, Rachel wrote her story, detailing the history of the bridge and the spirit that haunted it. It was published on the front page, capturing the city's attention. The story sparked a movement to honor the forgotten worker, bringing to light the injustice of his death. Tom, who had once viewed the bridge as just a structure, now saw it as a monument to the untold stories of those who had built it. He became an advocate for its preservation, ensuring that the memory of the worker and his fellow laborers was kept alive. The shadow on the bridge was never seen again after that night. Some say it was because the spirit had finally found peace, its story told and its presence acknowledged. Others believe it still lingers, watching over the bridge and its visitors. For Rachel and Tom, the bridge became a symbol of their journey into the unknown, a reminder of the power of unresolved spirits and the importance of unveiling hidden truths. The shadow on the bridge was no longer just a tale to scare children. It was a testament to the history that lay beneath the surface of the city, waiting to be uncovered. The Haunting of High Tower. High Tower stood like a sentinel over the city, its glass and steel facade reflecting the bustling streets below. To most, it was just another skyscraper, a testament to modern architecture. But to those who listened closely, it whispered stories of the past, stories that spoke of hauntings and unexplained phenomena. Nora, a fearless paranormal investigator, had always been drawn to places with a mysterious past, and High Tower was no exception. She had heard the tales, the disembodied voices echoing in empty corridors, the old elevator moving on its own, and the cold spots that appeared out of nowhere. Joining her in this eerie adventure was Max, a seasoned security guard at High Tower. Max had seen things that defied explanation and had his own reasons for wanting to uncover the truth. He knew every nook and cranny of the building and had access to places others didn't even know existed. As they began their investigation one stormy night, the skyscraper seemed to loom even larger, its many windows like watching eyes. The wind howled around its spire, and the rain tapped against the glass in a steady rhythm, as if setting the stage for the night's eerie events. Their first stop was the old elevator. It was said to operate on its own, stopping at floors where no one waited and opening its doors to empty halls. As they stepped inside, the lights flickered, and the elevator jolted to life, taking them not to the floor they had selected, but to one long abandoned. The hallway was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from their flashlights. The air was cold, and their breaths materialized in front of them. As they walked, they heard the faint sound of a woman's voice, singing a melancholy tune that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Max, normally unflappable, felt a chill run down his spine. This floor was closed off years ago, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the woman's song. Nora, her curiosity piqued, began to set up her equipment, hoping to communicate with the spirit. She had brought a spirit box, a device that could pick up electronic voice phenomena. As she turned it on, the singing stopped, replaced by static that filled the air with an electric charge. They proceeded to the heart of the skyscraper, the hidden attic room. Rumor had it that the room was used for secret meetings in the past and that it held the key to the building's hauntings. The door was locked, but Max had the key, a relic from a time when the room was still in use. The attic was like a time capsule, filled with old furniture and documents that told the story of Hightower's origins. As they sifted through the papers, Nora stumbled upon a photograph of a woman, the same woman they had heard singing. Her face was stern, her eyes seeming to follow them around the room. It was then that the temperature dropped, and the air grew heavy with the scent of old perfume. The spirit box crackled to life, and a voice came through, clear and strong. "Leave," it said, the word echoing around the attic. Nora, undeterred, began to conduct a seance, calling out to the spirit. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice steady. "We just want to understand your story." The response was immediate and terrifying. A gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing their candles and plunging them into darkness. The spirit box emitted a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, and the photograph of the woman fell to the floor, its glass shattering. Max, his skepticism fading, grabbed Nora's hand. "We need to leave now," he urged, pulling her towards the door. But as they tried to leave, the door wouldn't budge, as if held by an unseen force. The voices grew louder, their messages overlapping and incomprehensible. The air was thick with the presence of the spirit, angry and vengeful. In a moment of desperation, Nora shouted into the darkness, "We release you from this place. Find peace." The voices stopped as suddenly as they had started, and the door swung open, the force that held it shut gone. They stumbled out into the hallway, the storm outside seeming mild compared to the turmoil they had just experienced. As they made their way out of the skyscraper, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the city. Hightower stood silent, its secrets locked away once again. In the days that followed, the hauntings ceased. The old elevator stayed put, the cold spots disappeared, and the sound of singing was no more. Nora and Max had confronted the spirit, giving it the acknowledgement it craved, and in doing so, had set it free. The haunting of Hightower became a story Nora would tell for years to come, a testament to the lingering presence of the past and the clash between modernity and superstition. For Max, it was a reminder that some things couldn't be explained by logic and reason, that sometimes you had to believe in the unbelievable. But for both of them, Hightower would always be more than just a skyscraper. It was a place where the veil between the living and the dead had been lifted, if only for a night, and where they had come face to face with the unknown. The Vanishing at Victory Park. Victory Park, a sprawling expanse of green in the heart of the city, was known for its majestic trees, serene ponds, and picturesque pathways. But beneath its peaceful facade lurked a mystery that had baffled the city for years, a series of unexplained disappearances that occurred within its boundaries. Detective Emily, known for her sharp wit and unwavering determination, was assigned to the case. She had studied every file, every report, but the clues were as elusive as the park's secrets. That's when Kyle, a local who frequented the park, approached her with information that would turn the investigation on its head. Kyle had always found solace in the park's quiet corners, but recently he had noticed strange occurrences, shadows that moved unnaturally, whispers that seemed to come from the statues, and an eerie feeling that someone, or something, was watching him. Together, Emily and Kyle delved deeper into the park's mysteries. They spent days combing through every inch of the park, from the sunlit open spaces to the more secluded areas, shrouded in the dense foliage. It was during one of these searches that they stumbled upon a hidden underground passage, obscured by overgrown vines. The passage was narrow and dark, the air musty and cold. They ventured inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing walls that hadn't seen the light of day in years. The further they went, the more intense the feeling of unease grew. It was Kyle who found the diary, hidden in a crevice in the passage wall. It was old and weathered, its pages filled with cryptic writings and sketches of the park. The entries were dated back to decades ago, and as Emily read them, a chilling story began to unfold. The diary belonged to a man who had been obsessed with the park, believing it to be a gateway to another world. He wrote of rituals and ceremonies, of attempting to open a portal that would bridge the realms of the living and the dead. His final entry was the most disturbing, a confession of a betrayal, a sacrifice that would ensure the portal's opening. Emily's heart raced as she put the pieces together. The disappearances weren't random. They were targeted, each victim chosen as a part of this man's twisted plan. The realization hit her like a wave. They were dealing with something far beyond the scope of a regular investigation. They needed to act fast. Emily called for backup, her voice urgent as she relayed the information. But as they waited, a dense fog began to roll in, enveloping the park in a ghostly shroud. That's when they heard it, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, and the air grew colder. Kyle looked at Emily, his eyes wide with fear. "It's happening," he whispered. Without warning, the statues in the park came to life, their stone faces twisting into grotesque expression. Shadows danced around them, and the air was filled with the sound of whispers, growing louder with each passing moment. Emily and Kyle ran, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced through the park. The path seemed to twist and turn, leading them in circles. It was as if the park itself was alive, its paths changing to keep them trapped. They finally emerged from the park, gasping for breath. The city's lights seemed harsh after the darkness of the park, and the sounds of the city were a stark contrast to the eerie silence they had left behind. The backup arrived, but when they entered the park, it was as if nothing had happened. The statues were still, the fog had lifted, and the underground passage was nowhere to be found. It was as though the park had returned to its peaceful state, its secrets buried once again. But Emily and Kyle knew the truth. They had seen the darkness that lurked beneath the park's serene exterior. They had witnessed the cost of ignorance, the price of meddling with forces beyond human understanding. The case remained open, the disappearances unexplained. But for Emily and Kyle, Victory Park would never be the same. It was a reminder of the nature of fear, of the mysteries that lay hidden in plain sight, waiting for the curious and the brave to uncover them. The vanishing at Victory Park became a legend, a tale whispered among the locals. Some dismissed it as just another urban legend, but others knew better. They knew that sometimes the most terrifying truths were hidden in the light of day, masked by the beauty of nature and the passage of time. The Forgotten Library. In the heart of the city, hidden among the modern buildings, lay the Forgotten Library. It was a relic of the past, its once grand structure now shrouded in vines and neglect. Its doors hadn't opened for decades, and its secrets had been left to gather dust in the shadows. Oliver, a bookish historian with a passion for the forgotten corners of history, had always been fascinated by the library. When he met Lily, an adventurous photographer with a love for exploring abandoned places, they decided to venture into the library together, unaware of the ancient entity that slumbered within its walls. The library was like stepping back in time. The air was thick with the scent of old books and decaying wood. Rows upon rows of dusty tomes lined the shelves, their pages yellowed with age. Lily's camera clicked as she captured the gothic beauty of the place, while Oliver ran his fingers over the spines of the books, feeling a sense of reverence for the knowledge they held. As they delved deeper into the library, they came across a secret chamber, hidden behind a movable bookshelf. It was a small room filled with ancient texts and artifacts. The air was colder here, and the silence more profound. It was in this room that Oliver found the book that would change everything. It was an old, leather-bound tome, its pages filled with strange symbols and cryptic writing. Oliver, unable to contain his curiosity, began to decipher the text. As he read aloud, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The air grew heavier, and a sense of unease crept over them. Lily, feeling the change, urged Oliver to stop, but he was too engrossed in the book. It was then that they heard it, a whisper in the dark, a voice that seemed to come from the very walls of the library. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" The voice was ethereal, its tone filled with a mix of curiosity and anger. Oliver and Lily turned to see the spectral figure of a librarian, her form barely visible in the dim light. She floated towards them, her eyes fixed on the book in Oliver's hands. "You have awakened me," she said, her voice a mere echo. "For centuries, I have guarded these secrets, ensuring they remained undisturbed. But now you have unleashed them." Oliver, realizing the gravity of what he had done, tried to apologize, but the librarian was not appeased. She spoke of the ancient entity that the library had been built to contain, a force of knowledge and power that was never meant to be released. The library began to shake, books falling from the shelves, and the air crackling with energy. The entity was awakening, its presence filling the library with a malevolent aura. Lily, her instincts as a photographer forgotten, clung to Oliver. They watched in horror as the form of the entity began to materialize, a swirling mass of darkness and whispers. "You have disturbed the balance," the librarian said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Now, you must face the consequences." Oliver and Lily knew they had to act. Using the knowledge from the ancient texts, they began to recite an incantation, hoping to send the entity back to its slumber. The library trembled around them, the entity's roars echoing off the walls. As they chanted, the entity began to weaken, its form becoming less defined. The librarian watched, her spectral form flickering in and out of existence. With one final push of energy, Oliver and Lily completed the incantation. The entity let out a final, deafening roar before disappearing, the library falling silent once more. The librarian looked at them, a ghostly smile on her lips. "You have done well," she said before fading away, her duty fulfilled. Oliver and Lily emerged from the library, the morning sun blinding after the darkness of the library. The city around them bustled with life, unaware of the ancient battle that had just taken place. As they walked away, Oliver looked back at the library. It stood silent and forgotten, but he knew its secrets would remain with him forever. The forgotten library was more than just a building. It was a reminder of the power of knowledge and the dangers of disturbing what was meant to be left alone. For Oliver and Lily, it was an adventure they would never forget, a tale of ancient secrets and spectral guardians hidden in the heart of the city. The Unseen Tenant. In the heart of the city stood an apartment building that seemed just like any other. It had the same red brick facade, the same bustling noises from its residents, and the same comings and goings of a typical urban life. But there was something peculiar about this building, something that new resident Hannah would soon discover. Hannah, a young professional, had just moved in, drawn by the building's charm and its proximity to her new job. It was during her first week that she met Mark, a curious neighbor who lived just one floor below. Mark had always been fascinated by the building's oddities, particularly the legend of a floor that supposedly didn't exist. One evening, as they chatted in the lobby, Mark revealed the mystery of the hidden floor. "It's like it's there, but it's not," he said, his eyes gleaming with intrigue. "The elevator has a button for it, but it never stops there. And the stairwell, it just skips over it." Hannah, skeptical yet intrigued, agreed to help Mark investigate. They began by examining the elevator. Sure enough, there was a button for the mysterious floor, but pressing it did nothing. It was as if the elevator was programmed to ignore its existence. Their next stop was the stairwell. As they counted the floors, they found that the numbers indeed skipped over the non-existent floor. Between the 8th and 10th floors, there was a blank space on the wall where a number should have been. It was then that Hannah found an old, ornate key on the stairwell floor, hidden in a corner. The key was old and rusty, its origins a mystery. They wondered if it could be related to the hidden floor. That night, Hannah couldn't shake off the sense of unease that had settled over her. She lay in bed, her thoughts swirling with questions about the building and its secret floor. The next day, Hannah and Mark decided to take their investigation further. They discovered a maintenance door in the stairwell, right where the mysterious floor should have been. The old key fit the lock perfectly, turning with a loud click. The door opened to reveal a hallway that was starkly different from the rest of the building. It was shrouded in shadows, the air stale and cold. The wallpaper was peeling, and the light fixtures flickered erratically. It was as if they had stepped into a different world, one that time had forgotten. As they ventured further, they began to experience bizarre phenomena. Doors along the hallway led to nowhere, opening only to brick walls. Their watches stopped working, and their phones lost signal, as if technology couldn't penetrate this forgotten space. Whispers echoed down the corridor, though there was no one in sight. Shadows seemed to move on their own, twisting and turning in impossible ways. The atmosphere was suffocating, the sense of being watched overwhelming. In one of the rooms, they found a diary belonging to a former resident of the hidden floor. The entries were frantic, filled with tales of strange occurrences and a feeling of being trapped in a loop of time. The resident spoke of an unseen tenant, an entity that roamed the floor, its presence malevolent. The diary's final entry was the most chilling. It spoke of a plan to confront the unseen tenant, to break free from the endless cycle. But the entry ended abruptly, the words trailing off into an incoherent scribble. Hannah and Mark realized they were not alone on this floor. The unseen tenant was there with them, its presence growing stronger with each passing moment. They decided to leave, but as they turned to go, the hallway seemed to stretch on endlessly, the door they had entered through nowhere in sight. Panic set in as they hurried down the corridor, the whispers growing louder, the shadows more menacing. Just when they thought they were lost, they stumbled upon the maintenance door. They burst through it, tumbling back into the normalcy of the stairwell. The door slammed shut behind them, the sounds from the hidden floor abruptly cut off. Back in the safety of their own apartments, Hannah and Mark struggled to process what they had experienced. The building no longer felt like a simple urban residence. It harbored a secret, a hidden floor that existed in its own distorted reality, and an unseen tenant that lurked in its shadows. The mystery of the hidden floor remained unsolved, a secret that Hannah and Mark decided to keep. They knew that some things were better left undiscovered, hidden away from the world of the living. The unseen tenant of the hidden floor remained a mystery, a whisper in the halls of the building. For Hannah and Mark, it was a reminder of the illusion of normalcy and the unseen horrors that could lurk just beneath the surface of everyday life. The echoes of Hollow Street. In the outskirts of the city, there lay a desolate street known to the locals as Hollow Street. It was an unremarkable road, lined with abandoned houses and overgrown with weeds. But Hollow Street held a secret. It was said that the last words of those who had passed away there echoed endlessly, a ghostly reminder of their final moments. Greg, a pragmatic man with a scientific mind, was a skeptic of such tales. He believed there was a rational explanation for everything, including the legend of Hollow Street. Anna, on the other hand, was a firm believer in the supernatural. She was fascinated by the mysteries of the unknown and was convinced that the echoes were a portal to the other side. Driven by their opposing views, Greg and Anna decided to explore Hollow Street together, each determined to prove their point. Greg brought along an old tape recorder to capture any sounds, while Anna carried a diary she had found in a local library. The diary belonged to past visitors of the street and detailed their experiences and the words they claimed to have heard. As they walked down the street, the atmosphere changed. The air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over them. The houses, with their boarded-up windows and peeling paint, seemed to watch them as they passed. Greg remained skeptical, his tape recorder at the ready, while Anna read aloud from the diary. The entries spoke of sorrowful goodbyes, declarations of love, and even unspoken regrets, all echoing through the street. It was then that they heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible above the rustling of the leaves. Greg stopped in his tracks, his skepticism wavering. He held the tape recorder up, trying to capture the sound. The whispers grew louder, morphing into clear words. "Don't leave me," they echoed, a voice tinged with sadness and longing. Anna looked at Greg, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and vindication. They continued down the street, the echoes growing stronger with each step. The words were different each time, yet all shared a common thread of emotion and humanity. Greg's rational explanations began to falter as the voices surrounded them, each echo a fragment of a life once lived. As they reached the end of the street, they came across a house different from the rest. It was less decrepit, with a door that was slightly ajar. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, they entered. Inside, the house was as desolate as the street, but there was a palpable presence, as if the echoes had found a home within its walls. Greg and Anna explored the rooms, each step echoing on the wooden floor. In one of the rooms, they found a photograph of a young couple, smiling and full of life. The diary fell open in Anna's hands, revealing an entry about the couple, whose last words were among the echoes of Hollow Street. The revelation hit close to home for Anna. She revealed to Greg that her interest in Hollow Street was personal. The woman in the photograph was her great-aunt, who had passed away under mysterious circumstances on this very street. As night fell, the echoes grew louder, more insistent. Greg's tape recorder captured every word, but it was no longer about proving or disproving the legend. It was about understanding, about connecting with the voices that lingered in the air. The final revelation came when they played back the recordings. Among the myriad of voices, they heard a new one, clear and distinct. "Find peace," it said. It was Anna's great-aunt, her voice reaching out from the past. The experience changed both Greg and Anna. Greg, though still a man of science, had gained a new perspective on the mysteries of life and death. Anna found a sense of closure, a connection to her past that she had longed for. They left Hollow Street with more than they had bargained for. A tape full of voices from the past and a diary chronicling the experiences of those who had walked the street before them. The echoes of Hollow Street were more than just a legend. They were a testament to the power of words, the final messages of those who had once lived and loved. The street remained desolate, its houses silent and brooding. But for those who listened closely, the echoes continued to whisper, a bridge between the living and the dead, a reminder of the stories and secrets that linger in forgotten places. The Curse of the Crimson Moon. In the heart of the city, under the glow of a rare crimson moon, an air of unease settled over the streets. This was no ordinary lunar event. It was the crimson moon, a celestial phenomenon shrouded in ancient myths and dark prophecies. It was said that when the moon turned crimson, bizarre and terrifying events would unfold. Zoe, an aspiring astronomer, had always been fascinated by celestial events. But the crimson moon intrigued her for more than its scientific rarity. She was drawn to the legends that surrounded it. Her curiosity led her to Jake, a local legend enthusiast with an extensive knowledge of the city's myths. Together, they set out to explore the city under the eerie red glow, unaware of the otherworldly dangers they would face. As they walked through the deserted streets, the changes were immediately apparent. The city, usually bustling with life, was unnervingly silent. The only sound was the occasional howl of the wind, which seemed to carry whispers of ancient voices. The first sign that something was amiss came from the animals. Dogs barked incessantly, their eyes reflecting the crimson light in a disturbing way. Cats prowled the streets, their movements erratic and unnatural. Birds flew in disoriented patterns, as if the crimson moon had disrupted their senses. Zoe and Jake pressed on, driven by a mixture of fear and fascination. They noticed that the environment was changing too. The air felt thicker, and a faint, inexplicable fog began to roll in, blanketing the streets in a ghostly shroud. Their journey led them to the heart of the city, where the effects of the crimson moon were even more pronounced. Streetlights flickered and went out, plunging the streets into darkness. Shadows seemed to move on their own, twisting into grotesque shapes. It was then that the disasters began. A series of unexplainable events struck the city. Windows shattered without cause, alarms blared from every direction, and the ground trembled as if in the grip of an unseen force. Zoe and Jake found themselves in a fight for survival, dodging falling debris and navigating the chaotic streets. Amidst the chaos, they came across an old library, its doors mysteriously ajar. Inside, they found an ancient book containing a prophecy about the crimson moon. It spoke of a curse that would befall the city, a night when the boundary between worlds would thin, unleashing spirits and creatures of the night. The prophecy was becoming a reality, and Zoe and Jake realized that they needed to find a way to end the curse. The book hinted at a ritual that could be performed to appease the spirits and close the gateway between worlds. The key to the ritual was in the alignment of the celestial bodies, something Zoe understood well. With time running out and the city descending into madness, they raced to the highest point in the city, the old observatory. There, they had a clear view of the sky and could perform the ritual. As they set up their makeshift altar, the moon reached its highest point, bathing the city in a blood-red light. The air crackled with energy, and the sense of impending doom grew stronger. Zoe began the ritual, reciting the ancient words from the book, while Jake arranged the celestial charts and symbols around them. The wind howled, and the crimson light intensified, as if the moon itself was responding to their actions. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and a deafening roar filled the air. Shadows swirled around them, forming into spectral figures that circled the observatory. Zoe continued the ritual, her voice unwavering despite the terror that surrounded them. As she spoke the final words, a blinding light burst from the moon, illuminating the city in a brilliant crimson glow. The ground stilled, the shadows dissipated, and the eerie fog lifted. The moon slowly began to fade back to its usual silver, its crimson light ebbing away. The city was silent, the chaos of the night subsiding. Zoe and Jake looked at each other, exhaustion and relief written on their faces. They had faced the curse of the crimson moon and survived. As dawn broke, the city began to stir, its residents emerging to find a world that was once again normal. But for Zoe and Jake, the night's events would forever be etched in their memories. The crimson moon became a legend, a story passed down through generations. It was a reminder of the influence of celestial events on human fate and the unpredictability of nature. But for those who had lived through it, it was a testament to the courage and resilience of the human spirit in the face of otherworldly dangers.